Now, what was the main objective of the meeting and what were some of the main agenda points?
So the meeting as called by the President was a high-level task force on education. The main agenda points included discussion around the exclusion of grade 11s from the funding, the disparities that exist between the implementation and what was announced by the ministry, as well as the reduction in the threshold for non-tuition fee support, and also just to discuss delays in funding from NSFAF.
Despite the announcement of the subsidized tertiary education, you are still left with concerns. What are these concerns and how would you like them to be addressed?
Thank you very much. So first of all, grade 11 being an exit point has now been excluded from funding. What this means is that those learners that do not qualify for AS level but in the previous system qualified for university are forced to do a diploma, because now a bachelor's you need 26 points when it was previously 25 points. Another point of concern is also the disparity that exists between the funding for students that are continuing on to their honors is now classified as a postgraduate study, and as well as now the reduction of the non-tuition fee support from the threshold that was 500,000 to 100,000, because now you're saying we are funding students and keeping them in school, but they depend on these non-tuition fees to cater for their accommodation, to mention but a few. So are you funding students to keep them hungry and keep them in the States because they have nowhere to stay? And NSF also, they do not pay non-tuition fees on time. They have not also released their application, their applications yet. So what time will the students get to apply for these, and what time will they be processed?
Now, were the new requirements introduced by the ministry, and how do these requirements affect postgraduate and ordinary students?
The ordinary students, I think in this case, would be the grade 11s that I spoke about earlier, that are now excluded from funding, unless maybe the ministry can revert back to the previous requirements for NSF, which still included grade 11, or somehow maybe come up with a different category of funding for those that are exiting through the existing exit point of grade 11. And as for the postgraduate students, this is mainly to do, for example, students that are doing their bachelor's at NAST, progressing onto their honors, which is part of the program. Once they transition into their honors, they no longer qualify because the policy is saying they are only funding for the first primary qualification. Does that now become a secondary qualification, or do they mean students have to pay for that on their own? So some of those disparities need to be clarified. And just the policy in general also, there's so much difference between what the ministry is saying and how the universities are implementing it. There's not much coherence really from the ministry point of view and amongst all the institutions. You have some institutions charging registration fees while some are not, which is betraying the very fabric of what the policy is about.
How would you describe the relationship between the ministry and institutions of higher learning in addressing some of these concerns raised by students, like subsidized amongst others, or subsidies rather, amongst others?
Well, I think before the ministry announced this brilliant idea of free subsidized education, they should have spoken to the students and the universities. To the universities, what do they really want from the ministry in terms of funding, and the students, what do they need? Because now,
so what you're saying is proper consultation was not done?
I don't think proper consultation was done. It's a beautiful idea with a nightmare of an implementation, because now the universities are practicing differently. These ones are charging registration fees, these ones are not. The ministry is saying no one must pay registration fees. So I think from the point of the ministry, should really sit down with the universities and come up with a clear implementation strategy, rather than letting each university do as they please with and interpret the policy on their own.
Because I believe when they meant free education, the registration fee is also supposed to be included.
Yeah.
Now it becomes a hassle for the students now that want to register and study. Now let's go back to the meeting that you recently convened. How would you describe the attendance, and what are your overall expectations?
Well, the meeting comprised of various student leaders from different institutions of higher learning, the NANSO leadership, and many other trainee representatives. And we basically came together to find a unified student position and trainee position to say, this is what we are standing on, these are our demands in regard to the free subsidized education policy. And I think we will release our position paper soon, which clearly outlines in depth what was discussed and how we would like the method to be handled going forward. I would just like to say that also to the ministry, this is not the organization choosing to be defined of the policy rather, but we want the policy to be clear. You cannot tell us you're going on a date, but when the date comes, there is no clear way where are we going, what. So this is what we want the policy to reflect.
Now, what do you see in the future concerning this entire situation?
Well, if implementation is not refined, I think the brilliant idea that it might fail. I am of the idea that perhaps there should be a stepwise implementation as what happened with the AS curriculum and whatnot, because a stepwise implementation allows us to learn and refine as the process goes on, rather than dropping the bombshell at once.
Daniel, any final remarks?
Well, my final remarks to students, learners, trainees, the Namibia Students Organization is hosting a caucus today at NYC. So if you have time, definitely pass by there. And in general, also, congratulations to those that made it and qualified for university, but those that did not, go back, regroup, study hard, and try again. The failure does not mean the end in life.